and I'm from HiCom Accounting. So we are a tax agent and also an accounting firm. I myself also an NDIS provider. That's why the purpose of the live stream today is about sharing the tax tips for NDIS participants and also NDIS providers as well. A lot of people thinking that if you under National Disability Insurance Scheme, then you don't have to pay tax. It is not entirely correct, because think about it this way: NDIS is National Disability Insurance Scheme, but there will be this scheme cover for people from 0 to 65 years of age. There will be people over the age of 18. In some cases, people under 18 still paying tax, but generally speaking, most of the people under NDIS scheme, if you are over 18, there will be tax consequences, because that person, that participant, could receive distribution from family trust, could receive income from share, could receive income from investment properties. So those incomes still still taxable. If you receive funding from NDIS, you should think about the way that could help you to save tax. And to the parents who have NDIS participants, you need to think about, like, in the future, your kid is gonna be over 18, and then your kid will receive trust distribution from your own family trust. If your family running a business, you can use the name of the kid, even though the kid under NDIS scheme, to receive income from the family trust and receive income from multiple sources. So the tax tip today will be for both NDIS participants and NDIS providers. Firstly, I would like to talk about NDIS participants and also family member of NDIS participants. So the law at the moment is that any funding from NDIS, regardless of your family situation, the funding from NDIS will be tax exempt, which means that if a participant, even though you over 18 years of age, if you got income from working about 20,000, and then you got funding from NDIS about another 20,000, your taxable income will be only 20,000 from the income that you work for it, instead of the total income from NDIS as well. The money from NDIS will be tax exempt, which means that the deduction under the NDIS also be non-deductible as well. Say there's an IT expert who suddenly got accident, and then he cannot go to he cannot go to work in a company anymore. He can still work because he can still type, the knowledge still there, the skills still there, but he cannot work. So NDIS provide him the funding to set up an office at home. And the office at home including computers, table, chair and everything. And those total of those expenses, 20,000 for example, then these are the expenses that actually have to be spent in the course of earning income. But these expenses you receive under the NDIS funding. That's why these expenses are not going to be tax deductible in your tax return. Another case is like a person who, for example, like having her leg cut off from an accident, and now she needs to have the support from NDIS, because as long as the person got disabled, then they are rolled into the NDIS scheme. Then she received the funding from NDIS. The funding is non-tax deductible, and then NDIS buy her a car for her mobilization, and then she got a job. She works for money, she makes money, even though in normal situation, the car will be tax deductible. But this car she received under NDIS scheme, so she cannot use a car as expenses for in the cost of gaining income. So in her tax return, she cannot claim the deduction from the car. But Another kind of expense that all the NDIS participants or NDIS family members should think about is the medical offset. Say, before 2015, anyone, as long as you are Australian taxpayer, if you pay for medical, you can put into your tax return as medical offset under the item T5. But after 2015-2016, no one can claim medical offset except 3 subjects: disabled people, people under aged care, or people under attendant care. Say you work for money and then you pay for Medicare, you pay for all kind of that, like even Medicare levy surcharge, and on top of that, when you go to see the doctor, you still have to pay out of pocket. As normal person, you can't claim that amount. You can't put that amount into your medical offset. But if you are NDIS participant, you work from home, you do some sort of job, you make 60,000 per year, but because you are disabled, so say the wheelchair that you buy is $12,000. NDIS thinking that that amount is unfair. NDIS only give you $8,000 to buy the wheelchair. However, your families still want to go ahead to buy that wheelchair for $12,000. So the net medical expense that you have to pay out of your pocket is $4,000. And if you're under NDIS scheme, you can claim that amount. You can put that amount into your medical offset. That's one tip for people under NDIS participants. For NDIS participants' family, like mom, dad, or nominees of the participant who receive funding under the NDIS scheme, is it taxable or is it non-taxable? This is a very tricky question because it depends on case by case. Say, you provide the care for your mom or your dad or your children, but that is a self-managed plan. NDIS give you the funding for $10,000, in which you end up spending the whole $10,000 to get all the services for your family member who are NDIS participants. Then that $10,000 is not taxable. But if you as a carer for the family member who is having disability, so because some people, they need very, very personal care, like giving a bath or changing clothes, so they're not happy for strange people to help them with that. They're not comfortable for stranger carer to help them with it. Then family member will have to take care of the participant, and NDIS or the government pay you for that. The government pay you to become the carer of your family member. Then that funding will be taxed, and that considered as the taxable income. Any equipments, any expenses that you have to use to help your family members in the course of gaining that income will be tax deductible. But if you work as a personal carer for your family member or for your NDIS participants, then you deem as an employer. It works as a business. You need to have your own IBN, you need to withhold your own tax, and you need to do your own tax return at the end, because NDIS don't pay for you as an employee, or the government don't pay for you as an employee. They pay for you in terms of as a business owner. So there are 2 people in this scheme need to be careful about the money that receive into your bank account, which is the participant nominees, the participant family member. If you receive the money going to your bank account, you need to be able to distinguish, is that money for your caring services, then that's taxable, or is that money to give it for your kid or your family member, which end up spending for their services, then that fund is not taxed. It's not taxable. That's tax exempt. And as a plan manager, the person who managed the fund of NDIS people, you need to construct. What is the word for that? You need to structure your bank account very carefully, because you will receive 2 kind of funds. One fund will end up paying for other service provider on behalf of the NDIS participant, and another fund that you receive for your own services that you provide as a plan manager. So the fund that you receive on behalf of other service provider, that is not taxed, but the fund that you receive for your own services, that's taxable. So the way you do bookkeeping, you should separate them to make sure that it is also good for your reconciliation as well. It is also good for keeping track of your business. When you receive the money from the NDIS, you need to separate one part is for plan management services, and then the other part for to pay back to other service provider. So to sum up, as the NDIS participants, if you NDIS participants, then you should think about the medical offset, which is the item T5 in your tax return that you can claim as a tax offset. So second thing is that as an NDIS participant family member, if you receive funding from the government, then you need to speak with a professional to see if that fund taxable or tax exempt. And if that fund is taxable, then you need to do your tax return as a business owner, not as an employee. So as a business owner, there are certain expenses that you can claim under your business. Now, moving forward with the NDIS providers. So NDIS provider, because NDIS right now, it is a very what is the word for that? NDIS right now, it is a very new industry in the market. Even NDIS people in NDIS office, sometimes they don't even understand what is going on. The rules and regulation and the tax treatment around NDIS still pretty much like not much guidance for NDIS service provider. Hence, not many tax accountant or business advisor in the market right now understanding about the NDIS. So I got few tips for people who provide services under the NDIS scheme. First of all, there are many people who are rolling into providing NDIS services, whereas they already provide other services from their company before. Does it make sense? Say, they were running a medical clinic and now they provide another additional services for NDIS, but still one company, still one business, which means that your business providing multiple activities, and the tax treatment for each activity is different. Say a podiatry providing the NDIS services and also podiatry services as well. There would be retail activities like selling shoes, selling fitness products, selling the products that help with the fit of people. So those activities are retail activities. And then there will be income from NDIS. So in that situation, if you chuck all of the income into one account, which is sale, then it would be really, really hard for you to keep track of your business. The beauty of NDIS is that all the income from NDIS is GST free. Whereas if your business providing multiple activities and having multiple incomes, then some incomes will be GST and some income will be GST free. So your accountant should do bookkeep in the way to be able to distinguish these activities rather than just putting all of them into one account. And then even the same with expenses, your accountant should be like separating them into the NDIS expenses and also other expenses for different business activities. For example, you got staff working for NDIS like OT or specialist, but then at the same time you got retail people working for other retail activities. Then you should put, even though they are wages, but then there should be wages for NDIS and then wages for other activities. if you are NDIS provider, you're subject to be audited every single year. The thing is, as a normal business owner, you are subject to be audited by the ATO. That's the tax audit. It is different with NDIS audit. So if you do your bookkeep separated, one activity is for NDIS, then when you're going through audit by NDIS, you have no obligation of showing other activities of your business to NDIS people. You can just show the activities of the NDIS only, like, okay, this is the list of the clients, this is how much we receive from NDIS, and these are the things that we spend on NDIS activities as NDIS expenses, and that's all you show. You don't show the other part of your business. You don't have to show the retail part. You don't have to show the physio part or the podiatry part. You only show the NDIS part. But your tax accountant should be able to understand this, and or at least the bookkeeper or even the business owner should be able to understand this, to distinguish all the expenses and all the income into different categories like that. Because if you get audited by the ATO, they're gonna audit the whole business. That's a different thing. They audit you from the tax point of view to see if you avoid tax or to see if you like do anything dodgy in your business. But NDIS, when they audit, they only audit under the NDIS scheme. That's why you need to bookkeep them separately. When the NDIS people go to your business to audit you, you only show what is going on under the NDIS activity. So what I normally do for my clients is that you can still use one bank account, or maybe it would be better if you use two different bank accounts. One bank account to receive all the income from other activities, and one bank account that you receive income from NDIS. And for expenses, you need to inform your accountant that which expenses that you use for NDIS, because under the NDIS scheme, when you go through audit, you need to show to the NDIS people to make it look reasonable in the eye of NDIS. Say how many staff working on NDIS to be able to provide the good services for this many clients. Because if you got 100 clients that you provide support worker and you only have 1 or 2 staff under NDIS, that doesn't make sense. So even though in your business you got people working in the different categories of your business as well, then who are the ones that dedicated for NDIS? Who are the ones that do the general thing like admin or sale or retail, whatever? Then even wage and superannuation, or even the amount of money that you pay for contractor, still need to be separated as well. That's the way that you do bookkeep. So and it is the same thing for GST. NDIS income is GST free. So which means that any expenses that you spend under NDIS scheme, you can get the amount of GST back as well. So what about the other expenses of the business, say accountant fee or advertising fee or admin fee? Because you pay for one admin person, but it is for the whole business. NDIS client walked in and also normal client walked in as well. How do you separate? How do you separate like which part of the income is for of the expense is for NDIS, which part of the expense is not for NDIS? That's why one simple method that you can do is by separating the amount of income. For example, if your total income from NDIS is 40% and the other income from your other activities of your business is 60%, then you can, for all the overhead costs like admin, advertising, or paying for accountant, can be 40% under NDIS. Then you can claim 40% of that GST under NDIS. And then for the other activities, you can use 60%. So by the time you get audited, either by NDIS or by the ATO, it makes sense. But NDIS gonna audit you in terms of like what do you do with your business? Do you abuse the funding of the client or not? Or how do you provide the service? If you invoice the client like 1-to-1, like for example, support worker, there are different sections. You provide one-to-one support, or 1-to-2, or like one support worker to help with 4 children. Like any other kind of audits, any communication with your clients, service agreement, invoices, and email and everything, you need to say for at least 5 years. Not just the normal kind of audit with the ATO. ATO always recommend people to keep everything for 5 years. That is a rule, you have to do it. In NDIS, it is the same thing. 5 years communication, 5 years service agreement. Service agreement between the provider and the participant act as one kind of evidence to show that you charge this amount and your fee, and there is a scope of services that you provide for them, and it's already authorized by people. So NDIS gonna audit you in terms of like business structure and also the way that you do business, and it makes sense to them rather than like how much tax you pay. Only the ATO will audit you in terms of like how much tax you pay. Are you doing tax avoidance? Are you hiding anything in terms of money in your business? That's why if you're providing multiple activities, your accountant should separate different activities of your business, and then like NDIS income separated, and then NDIS expenses separated. When you go through audit with NDIS, you only show the part of NDIS of your business. You don't show any other part of your business, because even though you don't do anything wrong, but you don't want to waste time on answering all the unnecessary question, because the more time you go through audit, the more money you have to pay for the auditor. And then if you are unorganized in terms you do bookkeeping of your business, for example, like me, I got an accounting firm and I also an NDIS provider. So the way that I do bookkeeping is that I separate them into 2 different business or 2 different bank accounts. You don't have to separate them into 2 different business. You can still operate them into one business, but you need to bookkeep them separately. So if you go audit with the ATO, you show them everything, because ATO will want to know everything, but NDIS just want to know what is it going on with NDIS. You don't have to show any other part of the business. So 2 things. 1, very organized bookkeeping, separated NDIS income and separated NDIS expenses. All the people working under NDIS need to be paid separately with the different activities of the business. And then the second thing is that all the evidence under NDIS need to be saved for at least 5 years. And then how do you utilize all the expenses under NDIS when you're running NDIS and also other activities of the business? You should seek the professional advice, and also ask your accountant to do the very detailed calculation, play with the numbers to see which is the best way for you to utilize the GST free in the NDIS scheme. Because if you put too much expenses under NDIS, it's going to raise a question later on with NDIS. What is this going on with your business? Why do you need to spend this, spend that for the NDIS? Because every industry got its own benchmark. And under NDIS, there's like thousands of services provided, and then they got the standard requirements of how things should be. So your accountant should be able to understand how to make things look reasonable. In terms of tax, at the year end, altogether, it is going to come down to like, what is the total profit? What's the total income? What's the total expense? And then what's the total profit? But the NDIS audit is a different thing. So you need to be able to sit down, look at your account of your business, thinking about what are the way that you could make it look legit and reasonable, and be able to explain to NDIS people. And for NDIS participants, think about your kid right now, maybe just 1 or 2 years old, but then they're gonna get to 18 years old. Then they're gonna receive the distribution from your own family business. They're gonna receive multiple income from multiple sources. Then they have to do the tax return. So there are things in NDIS that you can claim as a tax offset, which is medical expense, net medical expense, and the NDIS funding that paid into your account for NDIS participants is tax exempt. So that's all for today. Make sure that you talk with your accountant and make sure that your accountant understanding your business situation and the amount of accountant on the market right now understanding in NDIS and how to structure your business, how to do your account in a very organized and very good way for you are very limited. So if your accountant can help you with that, you can talk with me. I can help you with that. Thank you. Bye.